fake surgeries that worked just as well as real ones, a lab accident where metal bent and floated for no clear reason, and a Mars experiment that may have detected life. These are more experiments that produced results no one could explain. Back in 2022, a surgeon named Bruce Moseley ran an experiment. He had a group of patients with serious knee pain to the point where they could barely walk. He split them into 3 groups. 2 groups got real surgery. One had their knee joint flushed out. The other had the damaged cartilage cleaned up. The 3rd group, though, this is where it gets interesting, they got taken into the operating room, put under, and Moseley made 3 small incisions in their skin, but he never actually went inside the knee. He didn't really touch anything. It was completely fake. Oddly though, the people who had the fake surgery felt just as good as the ones who had the real thing. Same pain relief, same improvement in how they moved around, and this wasn't just them saying they felt better to be polite. They were physically moving better. 2 years later, those same people were walking and climbing stairs just as well as the patients who had actual surgical work done on their knees. So what that tells us is that the brain has this enormous, almost hard to believe ability to reduce chronic pain or even start healing just because it believes that something was done. The belief alone was enough to create a real, measurable physical change. In 1979, a guy named John Hutchison, who was essentially just a hobbyist inventor living in Vancouver, was playing around with a bunch of high voltage machines and radio wave equipment, stuff he'd pieced together trying to recreate some of Nikola Tesla's old experiments. And while he was running all this equipment at the same time, he started noticing things happening in his lab that made absolutely no sense. Heavy objects were lifting off the ground and floating, like a 70-pound cannonball, just slowly rising into the air. Pieces of metal were going soft at room temperature, like they'd turned into clay, even though nothing was heating them. Wood and metal were fusing together. He got some of this on camera, and the footage looked completely insane. Here's the part that's hard to just wave away. People from the Pentagon and from Los Alamos National Laboratory, a facility that works on nuclear weapons, actually came to his apartment and saw this happening. They filmed some of it themselves, but when they tried to take his equipment back to their home labs to replicate it, nothing worked, and Hutchison himself could never get it to happen on demand. It was inconsistent and unpredictable, which led a lot of people to call the whole thing a hoax, but the original footage still exists and nobody's been able to fully explain it. If what Hutchison captured was real, it means there's some combination of radio frequencies that can mess with gravity and change how dense matter is. The problem is that whatever specific setup made it work seems to be a mystery nobody's been able to recreate since. There's something that keeps showing up in survival stories across different parts of the world. It's consistent enough that it has its own name, the third man factor. This is when someone in a life-threatening situation starts to sense another person nearby, a presence. Ernest Shackleton, the famous explorer, is probably the most well-known example. He and 2 other men were crossing the mountains of South Georgia Island in brutal conditions, and all 3 of them, independently, felt like there was a 4th person walking with them. This mysterious 4th person didn't say anything, it just felt like this calm, steady presence was guiding them through. Hundreds of other people have reported the same thing. Climbers running out of oxygen near the summit of mountains, sailors lost out at sea, people trapped in wreckage, and in a lot of these cases, the presence isn't just a vague feeling of company, it's giving them specific information. Turn left here, stay awake, keep moving. Instructions that end up saving their lives. Scientists have tried to explain it by pointing to what happens to the brain under extreme stress and oxygen deprivation. There's even a device called the God Helmet that uses magnetic fields on the brain's temporal lobes that can make people feel like someone else is in the room with them. So there is a mechanical explanation here, but that doesn't fully explain how specific and useful these encounters have been. It doesn't explain why the presence almost always helps, why it shows up across people with completely different belief systems, or why the information it gives tends to be exactly right. It acts a lot less like a hallucination, more like some kind of backup system the brain switches on when it's about to shut down completely. When NASA landed the Viking probes on Mars in 1976, the big question was whether anything was alive in the Martian soil. So they ran a test called the Labeled Release Experiment. So the idea was to scoop up some Martian dirt, add a liquid full of nutrients laced with radioactive carbon, and then wait. If there were microbes in the soil eating those nutrients, they'd breathe out radioactive carbon dioxide and the sensors would catch it. The test came back positive. The sensors picked up exactly the kind of gas spike you'd expect to see if there were tiny living things in the soil. But the problem was, another instrument on the same lander, one that was designed to look for organic molecules, it found nothing. So there was a contradiction. NASA called the whole thing inconclusive. In the late 60s, a scientist named Jean Calhoun built the most comfortable environment he possibly could for a group of mice. He called it Universe 25. It was unlimited food, unlimited water. There were no predators, of course. He put 4 pairs of mice inside and let them do their thing, and for a while it looked exactly like you'd expect. The population exploded. Numbers were doubling every 55 days. But then, when the population hit around 2,200 mice, which was still nowhere near the physical limit of the space, everything started to fall apart. With no competition for food and no threats to deal with, the mice kind of stopped behaving like mice. The males started attacking each other randomly, or they just stopped engaging. A whole group of males, which Calhoun called the beautiful ones, they just totally checked out. They didn't mate, they didn't fight, they didn't really interact with anything. They just ate, slept, and groomed themselves all day. The females stopped nursing for their young. They stopped reproducing. Even though the food was still there, even though nothing physical was actually wrong with them, the birth rate dropped to 0. The mice were healthy, they just stopped wanting to continue. Calhoun described it as a kind of death that happens before the physical death, the loss of whatever makes a social animal want to participate in life. Eventually the last mouse died, and it was left was a fully stocked, perfectly safe enclosure with no living mouse inside it. So what the experiment seemed to show is that struggle isn't just an obstacle to a good life. For a lot of species, maybe even us, it might actually be the thing that keeps life going in the first place. I mean, take it completely away and something essential seems to go with it. There's a principle in cosmology that basically says that the universe has no special center and there's no preferred direction. It's the same in every direction you look, and we're not positioned anywhere particularly significant. Scientists call this the Copernican principle. To test it, they used a satellite to map the leftover heat from the Big Bang, the cosmic microwave background. Think of it like a photograph of the universe from just after it was born. The expectation was that it would look random and chaotic. Instead, they found a pattern though. There's a cold spot and a kind of alignment in the temperature data, a line that stretches across the universe. It's organized in a way that you wouldn't think it would be. Basically, this alignment pointed to the universe having something like a direction, an up and a down. Physicists were uncomfortable enough with this that they named it the axis of evil. Partly as a joke, obviously, but also because it did genuinely call into question some very established ideas about how the universe formed. In West Dunbartonshire, Scotland, there's a stone bridge called Overtoun Bridge, and for decades, it's had a very eerie reputation. Dogs, healthy, normal, domestic dogs, are known to jump off this bridge. It almost always happens on clear, sunny days. The dogs almost always jump from the same spot on the right side of the bridge, and in some recorded cases, dogs that survived the fall and were brought back up to the bridge, they just jumped again. Over 600 dogs have gone off this bridge. Animal behaviorists and biologists have been trying to come up with an explanation for years. The most common theory is that the scent of minks living in the rocks below might be so intense that it just sends some dogs into a kind of hunting frenzy that's so strong they don't notice the drop or don't care. But minks live all over Scotland, and dogs aren't throwing themselves off of other bridges. Other ideas involve sound frequencies or magnetic anomalies that only animals can detect in that area. Clearly, something about this location is causing this to happen, but as of right now, there's no definitive answer as to what that is. In 1901, a doctor named Duncan McDougall came up with a pretty wild experiment. His idea was that if the soul is a real physical thing that exists inside the body, then it must have weight. And if it has weight, then at the moment someone dies, the body should get slightly lighter as the soul leaves. So to test this, he found 6 patients who were in the final stages of terminal illness, put their entire beds on large, very sensitive scales, and then just waited. And what do you know, the moment the first patient died, the scale did register an immediate unexplained drop in weight, 3/4 of an ounce, or 21 grams. He ran the same test on the 5 other patients. The results were kind of all over the place. Some lost weight, some didn't. One seemed to lose weight and then gain some back. It was inconsistent. He also ran the test on 15 dogs and found no weight change at all in any of them. So there you go. That's why animals don't go to heaven. Scientists today mostly reject the study though. The weight loss, they say, was probably sweat evaporating quickly or air leaving the lungs at the moment of death. The sample size was also tiny and the results weren't repeatable in a reliable way, but that number, 21 grams, it kind of stuck. It's been in the public consciousness for over 100 years because of what McDougall was attempting. It was something almost no one has ever tried, actually measuring whether there's something physical that leaves the body at death. The recurrent laryngeal nerve connects your brain to your larynx, which is the part of your throat that lets you talk. Your brain and your larynx are only a few inches apart. Common sense says that the nerve should go pretty much straight from one to the other, but it doesn't. Instead, the nerve travels down from the brain, goes all the way into your chest, loops around the aorta, the biggest blood vessel in the body, right near the heart, and then travels all the way back up to the throat. In humans, that's a detour of several inches for a connection that should have been made directly. But in a giraffe, that same nerve has to travel the full length of the neck twice, down and back up, which adds about 15 feet of extra nerve to cover a gap that's only a couple of inches. There's really no benefit to this. If someone designed a machine that worked this way, it would be considered a serious design flaw. Biologists explain it as an evolutionary leftover. Back when our ancestors were fish, the heart was closer to the gills, and the nerve's path made more sense. As the body evolved and the neck got longer and the heart moved lower, the nerve got stuck, looping around a blood vessel, and just kept stretching instead of rerouting. But it does go to show, evolution isn't always efficient. In the 50s, while nuclear weapons testing was happening regularly in Nevada, the government's official position was that the fallout from those tests wasn't reaching the general public in any meaningful way. But a group of scientists in St. Louis didn't believe that, and they came back with a way to check. They asked parents across the city to donate their children's baby teeth when they fell out. Hundreds of thousands of teeth came in. The scientists were looking for a specific radioactive element called strontium-90. It behaves like calcium in the body, which means if it got into the food supply, it would be absorbed directly into the bones and teeth. And once it's in there, you can measure it. Well, the results were pretty alarming. Children born in 1963 had levels of strontium-90 in their teeth that were 50 times higher than in children born before nuclear testing started. 50 times. The radioactive material was being carried by wind, landing on grass, getting eaten by cows, and then passing into young people through milk. The data helped push the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty in 1963, though, which put an end to nuclear tests in the atmosphere. And that's been the video. I will catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next one.